Recently on the channel, I did a video with Gavin Wall about the essentials you need to know before getting into sheep. As part of that video, I had this set of yards in use. I've had a number of questions about the yards following on from that video, and people have been quite interested in not only the dimensions, but the materials and the construction that I've used. So this is a short video on a set of yards that was built from scratch, out of scrap. It's not necessarily going to be the ideal solution for you, but hopefully by going through what's working and what's not working, it'll give you some great ideas for a project of your own. Now before we go any further, these yards are ideal for somewhere between half a dozen to a dozen sheep and no more. If you're going to get more sheep than that, you probably need slightly more complex yards with better handling equipment. But for a small home hobby farm flock, something like this is working out well for me. Now, as I've already said, these yards started as a project to use up scrap. So I happen to have an old 3.6 metre or 12-foot gate. And this was the starting point, I suppose, for the whole idea, was to use the one gate as not only a force to load the yards, but then also as a squeeze to put the sheep into a race. This has worked out quite well, but one thing I've learned is if you've got a 3.6 metre gate, make your shed 3.6 metres wide, because it has an impact on the way that the squeeze works when you want to get your sheep into a nice tight race for easier handling. As you can see, when I close the gate on the shed, I've now got a sort of a triangular race. Now that's not a big deal for me. And certainly with 4 to 6 sheep, that's not a problem at all. You can actually fit quite a few more in because it's not so narrow, but it does mean when you're trying to get to individual sheep, the ones down here tend to be a bit doubled up. So next time I'd bring the shed out to the same width as the gate, have the gate close on the shed quite neatly, and have a nice thin race to handle my sheep more easily. Of course, I don't see this as being a major problem, because all it means is I'm just going to weld up a small little gate here that folds against the side of the wall, use a bit of world-class creativity, and enjoy a nice project. The location of the post that the gate swings off is the most important component of the yards, because it allows the gate, as it travels through 180 degrees of travel, to do 3 jobs. The first, of course, is to form part of the force with some temporary panels at the end of the gate to get the sheep into the yards to begin with. Once the sheep start to travel in, of course, the gate can then be closed up against this latch post, forming a nice big square yard here for drafting sheep or handling them generally. If we then want to give them medication, or we want to isolate a few sheep, we can either put them into the shed or we can put them into the race by using this gate as a squeeze. The use of the one gate was pivotal to these small little yards working effectively. You see, you really want 3 things out of your yards, don't you? You want to keep your animals safe, you want to keep your people safe, and you want to lower the stress of handling them. With the one gate travelling through 180 degrees, you can not only load your yard, you can then also draft off your sheep or force them into a race so that you can handle them really, really easily with low stress. Building the yard panelling was quite easy. All I did was put in some treated pine posts at the corners and also in the middle of the long runs. I didn't leave more than about 1.5 metres of timber unsupported by a post. And then I used some hardwood pellet material for the short ends, and I had to go and buy some treated pine barge boards for the longer sections, simply because I wanted material that wouldn't break and let me down in 2 or 3 years' time. Long pallets are available, but they're harder to find, and I couldn't get any when I needed them. I used bugle batten screws to attach these longer panels to the treated pine posts, and you'll notice that I've got the panels facing towards the stock, so that if they put any pressure on the panels, it also puts pressure on the post rather than pulling them off the post. Always try and put your panels towards the pressure side. Now the shed itself is 3 metres wide by 2.4 deep. You could easily go 3 by 3 and it would give you more room inside. The roof is also 2 meters above your head at its lowest point. So it means even if you're tall, if you're mucking around in here with sheep, you're not going to stand up and bang your head, which is something I really hate about small sheds. Just because you've come in on the front and the back doesn't mean that you should lower the roof. It also means that the sheep are cooler in a taller shed because the heat stays up higher. The roof frame itself is made out of 90 by 35 pine, and I know people will probably criticise me for choosing a small timber for the roof. You could certainly go for a larger size if you want. I was just trying to contain costs, and I already had some, meaning that I just stuck with it. What I did do is I bought an extra length and I went down to a 600 centre between the frame. So the roof has sat nicely on the shed now for about a year and it's not going anywhere. The wall panels are made out of treated pine paling fence panels. They're 1.8 high around the sides and the back, and I've used 900 in the front. They're supported on 3 lots of barge boards, one at about the shoulder height of the sheep, one down low, one up high. If you had a more vigorous breed, I'd probably increase the number of barge boards that you're using to support your walls. But for my little baby doll South Downs, they're really calm, placid animals, and it's been no drama at all. You'll probably notice that there's gaps between the palings, and that's because I haven't used the smaller secondary palings to cover that gap up when they shrink and dry. When I put it together, of course, they were all butted up together, but then they shrank, and it's left me actually with some lovely gaps here for light and airflow. And I think it actually improves the structure for its purpose, which is sheltering the animals. It dries out really quick, even if there's rain, because of the airflow. The front of the shed, once again, comes down to knowing your animals. It's worked out quite well with the baby dolls because they don't try and push at structures. If I had a more vigorous or larger breed, I'd probably want them to be blind at the front as well, maybe a little bit higher and a little bit better reinforced, particularly if I was separating a sick one from the mob, because they'll probably kick about a bit and it might cause damage to an otherwise flimsy structure. Of course, no project on a farm is finished, and this one certainly isn't either. This is the area that the loading ramps are going to go into, leading off from the race, and this will allow trailers to back in off the road and load up with any animals that I need to move to a vet, sell, or otherwise dispose of. So there you go. With one main gate to rule them all, these yards combine 3 separate areas to make handling my small hobby farm flock so much easier, so much safer, and so much less stress, which are the 3 objectives of any yard system. Yes, you can get really fancy with sheep, but when you've only got a few and you're dealing with scrap materials, you can also use a bit of this to make your life a whole lot easier. There are some future modifications coming to these yards, and I'll keep you posted as I go, mainly around the loading ramp and also setting up for shearing every year. If you found this video useful, do me a favour, please hit the subscribe button, give it a thumbs up, and there's plenty more on timthompson.ag, and you never know, I might build something next week.